Great to see you, my friend.
The same. So I know that in the past, Meredith lets the chairman off the hook because we normally have to give presentations, and the chairman now doesn't have to give a presentation because she just asks some questions. But I have been on this stage a fair bit over the last few years. You have not. And so I'm going to turn the table a tiny bit on you if you don't mind.
It's feeling more and more like a congressional hearing of old.
Yes, we're getting there. We're getting there. So maybe a bit more back and forth. Question for you.
Okay.
You talked about 4 years away from the policy arena.
Yeah.
The return of Ajit Pai. What brings you back?
Well, first and foremost, it's just an energizing time for the industry. I'm a long-standing first adopter of wireless, going back to the dawn of the commercial wireless sector in the mid-1990s. And one of the things I've loved about this industry, it's always reinventing itself, always disrupting itself, delivering value. And to be a part of that conversation now is just tremendous. And of course, as well as you know, this is a really critical aperture, both in terms of policy and technology. So really grateful to work with the team at CTIA, with great carriers and members like you, and hopefully help deliver some value for the American consumer in the years to come. It's a really exciting time. And if I might, actually, I might turn the question back to you. I've been gone for 4 years. What did I miss? Has anything been happening in this industry that I should know about?
Nah, same as 4 years ago, no change. Yeah, I'd point to a few things over the last 4 years. I mean, obviously, the pandemic, almost 5 years ago, I suppose.
I did hear about that.
Yes, that did happen. To me, I mean, I've been in this industry for a long, long time, only reinforced the importance and the criticality of what we do. I think particularly, and obviously that's for telecom writ large, for the wireless industry, we expected to see a bit of a dip in demand when everyone's theoretically at home. That did not occur, right? Yeah. We continue to see 20 to 25% growth in demand, and that has continued past the pandemic to now. A lot of that growth driven by a relatively new product in fixed wireless, right? And so new products, new instantiations of 5G really starting to emerge more recently, of which obviously fixed wireless is a big one. What hasn't happened over the last 4 years is any new spectrum.
Yeah.
And if you're sensing a theme, that's going to be a theme for today. You have been in the middle of conversations. I mean, I know you're only, a few weeks into the job?
Yeah, grizzled veteran of 1 month.
Yeah, so 1 month in the job, but I know you've been part of some conversations about spectrum. You mentioned it in your introductory comments. Maybe give a flavor about how some of those conversations are going. How do you feel? Is the message landing? Do people understand it? Give me a sense about where we're at.
Yeah, I think the message is landing well, and I think we have the fortune of being in a part of the industry that has significant tailwinds, the most obvious of which is that consumers want wireless services and products. This is one of the things that people actually desire in their daily lives. It makes their lives better. And so when we go to make these arguments in the administration, in the halls of Capitol Hill, we're pushing, generally speaking, an open door. People recognize the value that the wireless industry delivers. And even more than that, of course, in the lingua franca of this town, this is one of the most incredible revenue-generating programs, the spectrum auction program at the FCC, that has ever existed. Delivered over $200 billion of value to the American taxpayer over the years. During my time at the FCC, of course, that was a significant part of our wireless agenda. And so now when we go to have these conversations, people recognize that wireless policy does not exist in a vacuum anymore. It is economic security. It is national security. It helps us promote fiscal responsibility in terms of helping to pay for national priorities. And this is one of the great things about the message that we're conveying at CTIA is that this message doesn't know political affiliation. It's not limited to one particular committee. This is something that all Americans, all elected officials can embrace. And I'm grateful to say that over the past 4 weeks, our fantastic team has been able to hit the ground running and really get the message across in a way that ideally will deliver some value in the context of the reconciliation bill and some of the other vehicles that are out there. And if they do get the job done, of course, then the question shifts to execution. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, the president, when I was the chairman, really set the marker, and he's doing that again in terms of wireless policy. If he puts in place some of those building blocks for companies to innovate around, auction authority, auction pipeline, how do you approach that possibility? What needs to happen for you to be able to come to the table and participate meaningfully in these spectrum auctions?
Yeah, it's an interesting calculus that wireless companies engage in when we look at spectrum and spectrum auctions. mean, I mentioned growth and demand. We have not seen growth really tailing off, so you continue to see every year 25% growth in demand. You can either put more towers in place, or you can bring more spectrum to bear. It is about twice as expensive to put new towers in place, and so we generally look for opportunities to do it via spectrum.
Yeah.
And so then you say, okay, well, what does it take for wireless companies to open up the pocketbook, for lack of a better word, and bid aggressively? And there's a bit of a hierarchy. I would start with the spectrum needs to be licensed. It is one thing to spend money on spectrum, but just buying spectrum does not mean that it is now available for users. It's not available for the American public. You actually have to bring that spectrum to bear by putting radios in place, by building towers, by putting fiber in place. And so you have to spend a lot of capital behind the spectrum that you purchase. And so spending that capital with confidence means that you need to know that you're going to have access to the spectrum. And so that's why licensed spectrum is so important, because that way I'm spending a bunch of capital on radios, knowing that that spectrum will be there when I need it.
Right.
As opposed to if it's unlicensed, it's much more difficult to spend a bunch of capital on radios and then cross my fingers and hope that I might get access to that spectrum.
Right.
Licensed is critical. Full power is critical. The higher power I can put behind spectrum, the less towers I have to put in place, the better the propagation, the better I can serve our customers. Global harmonization is important. You mentioned it briefly in your opening comments. When we buy radios, right, we buy them from Ericsson, from Nokia, from Samsung. The more carriers that are buying radios from an individual provider, the more cost efficient it is for them to provide it. And if it's not just carriers in one country, if it's many countries creating an ecosystem around a specific piece of spectrum, it becomes more and more cost efficient. So global harmonization is key. It's really important to have a wide band of spectrum. And so it doesn't help carriers to have really narrow bands here and there that you can bid on. And the reason's twofold. One, it's not technically efficient. The broader spectrum bands that we have, the more we can bring carrier aggregation to play, the more speeds, the better experience we can provide to our customers. And from an auction perspective, auctions are competitive. Yeah. I bid against AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile when we're buying spectrum, and each of us is going to try to find our piece of spectrum. And so the broader the swath of spectrum that you have available, the more you have available to any individual carrier, and that creates auction efficiencies as well.
Exactly.
And then and only then do you get into which band, right? And so right now, mid-band spectrum is critical. It's the beachfront spectrum for 5G. It will be the beachfront spectrum for 6G. Properly balances the need for coverage with the need for high speeds. And so you put all of that together, what is the recipe for a successful auction? Licensed, full power, globally harmonized, a broad swath of spectrum, and ideally in mid-band. Yeah. We've talked a lot about spectrum. We have 1 minute and 50 seconds left in our conversation. I know that spectrum is not the only priority. I know it's a big one for you. Yeah. But I know it's not the only priority. And so as you think about your role as CEO moving forward of CTIA, how do you think about your priorities for the next 3, 4, 5, maybe 10 years?
No, I appreciate that. And yeah, as you pointed out, we're much more than, as Seinfeld would have called that, wizard. We do other things, not just spectrum. Of course, there are so many things that are on our table, on our plate. Infrastructure reform, which I talked about. It's one thing to have the airways available. If you don't have the infrastructure to carry a lot of that traffic, then a lot of it is all for naught. And so we're working collaboratively with all levels of government to make sure that we can build in the United States unhampered by unnecessary regulations. And this is something ultimately that is not just a matter of getting better and faster wireless services. In some cases, it could be a matter of life and death, to the extent that, for example, the vast majority of calls to 911 now are on wireless phones. And so we want to make sure that that infrastructure is everywhere where consumers are. Secondly, talking about wireless no longer as a siloed part of the policy discussion or technology stack, but really critical to enabling all these other technologies, artificial intelligence, for example, which you and I have talked about a lot. To me, at least, wireless is a key technology platform for enabling the future of AI. And I think it's important for wireless to have a seat at the table when we're thinking about how do we make the United States a leader in these next generation technologies like AI. Wireless is the ultimate enabler because, as we've talked about it again before, this is where the puck is going from the consumer experience. And so just making sure that CTIA has a seat at the table in all of these different policy discussions, working with our members, and trying to convey the message that ultimately our message is on behalf of the American wireless consumer who's voting every day with his or her dollars and phone to make sure this is a more connected experience.
Well, I can tell you, Ajit, and on behalf of the broader board, we're excited to have you on board. I will echo what you said about Meredith. Her leadership over the last 10 years has been absolutely fantastic. We will miss her. We're excited to have you on board and looking forward to your leadership moving forward. And thank you, everybody, for the time. And I wish you all a great summit for the rest of the afternoon. Cheers.
Thank you, folks.